In this lesson, I want to talk about testing JavaScript hooks. LiveView can do a lot for us, but sometimes when we have to interact with heavy JavaScript, we need to resort to using hooks. And Phoenix LiveViewTest comes with some helpers that allow us to test part of that. So let's take a look at what we have. If you go ahead and open up your router, you'll see that we have a timeline live mounted on /timeline. If you launch your server, you'll go ahead and see that we have a list of posts, and it loads by default 10 posts. When you scroll down, the next 10 posts will be automatically loaded. And you can keep scrolling down, and if you scroll far enough, you'll actually see the loading indicator because we've run out of posts to load, and that's just because we're using a static list of posts. But the functionality is there, right? The first few times you scroll, it's automatically loading more posts. So let's see how we've implemented that. Go ahead and open up your timeline live. And as you can see, we are rendering a list of posts here. We're using Phoenix Update streams, and for each post in that stream, we're rendering both the author name and the text. And the interesting part is down here. We have a loading indicator, and this has an ID of load more. And if you scroll further down, you see that we have the Phoenix hook infinite scroll. Now, when we mount our live view, we're going to start at an offset of 0 and a limit of 10. That means we're having some pagination, and we'll take a look at that in a little bit more, how that works. But we're going to start with the limit 10. So we're just going to grab the first 10 posts, and we're going to assign them as a stream into the socket, and we're going to also assign the offset and the limit. Now, let's go ahead and open up the JavaScript side of this to see what we're doing there when we load this infinite scroll Phoenix hook. So go ahead and open up app.js. And as you can see, we have some hooks defined, and the infinite scroll hook, what it's doing is using the intersection observer. When we intersect that element, and now this element, remember, is that loading indicator, it's going to push the event to LiveView that says load more. So let's now go back to our LiveView and take a look at that handle event. And here it is. Now, what are we doing in this handle event? The first thing we're going to do is update the offset. So think of it this way. Our offset originally was 0, and we're going to update it by the limit. So our limit was 10. So the next offset is going to be 10. So basically, we're just moving the cursor, right? And then we're going to call this function stream new posts. Stream new posts is doing the following. It's grabbing the new offset. So once again, if it was 0 the first time, now it's 10. And then the limit, which is again 10. So we're not changing the limit. The limit is just how many posts we get each time we paginate. And then we're going to use our timeline module and ask for the next 10 posts, right? So this offset is 10 and the limit is 10. So we're asking the next 10 posts, so basically 11 through 20. Once we get those posts, we're going to reduce through them, and we're going to stream insert each post into the socket. Once we have that socket, we're going to go ahead and no reply socket. So that's fundamentally how this is working. Now, how do we test it? Let's go ahead and open up the test. And of course, that's going to be under Test, Ranger Web Live, Timeline Live Test. And let's go ahead and add a test here that says that the user can see all their posts with infinite scroll. I'll take in the connection struct as usual. And let's do a little bit of setup. We're going to use this timeline module to grab a post. And it's going to return a list, but there's only going to be a single one. We're going to call posts, and here what we want to do is grab the 11th post. So what we're going to do in our test is, we know that the first 10 posts get rendered, but we want to grab the 11th post and make sure that if we hit that load more indicator, that it's going to show the 11th post. So let's go ahead and grab the offset of 10 and the limit 1. We don't really need to load more than one post because we just care about the 11th in this case. I'll go ahead and mount our live view, ignore the HTML, and this path here is timeline. Excellent. So how do we do this? What we want to do is interact with the page as though we were loading more posts. So we're going to grab the view, we're going to target an element. And if you remember, the element for the load more had a load more ID. And here we're going to call loading. Once again, this is coming from that element. So let's go ahead and take a look at it just to be extremely clear. If you scroll up, this loading has a load more ID. And so we're targeting this element because this element has the Phoenix hook infinite scroll. I'll go back to the test. And once we have this, we're going to go ahead and use the render hook helper. Render hook helper comes from Phoenix LiveViewTest, and it takes the element we're passing, and then it takes the event we're going to trigger. So this is the load more event, and then it takes some other values we could be sending, but we're not sending any other values. Now, make sure this matches what you have in JavaScript. So once again, if we go ahead and open up app.js, it's this exact event we're sending right there. So I'll go back to the test. Now, once we trigger that event, what do we expect? Well, we expect our LiveView to render the 11th post, right? So I'll go ahead and assert that we have that post. We can do that in this way. We have a couple of data roles that are helpful for us. We have an author data role that we can assert that the author's name is there. And then we have something very similar, but it's the post data role. And we can assert that the post text is there. Excellent. Let's go ahead and run this test. And it passes. That's awesome. But I want to make sure we understand this. Let's go ahead and see how we can make this test fail to understand which parts of our stack this is testing. So I'll go ahead and go to the timeline live. And the first thing I'll do is let's go ahead and remove this loading indicator. Is our test actually doing anything? So I'll go ahead and remove that and rerun the test. Excellent, it fails. And if you take a look at why it fails, it's because it can't find that load more ID. So that's really helpful. But what else is that doing for us? Well, what happens if we remove the Phoenix hook infinite scroll, right? But we leave the rest of the HTML there. I'll go ahead and rerun that test and see the failure. That's super helpful. As you can see, this is showing us that that element with the load more ID doesn't have that Phoenix hook attribute attached to it. Perfect. So I'm going to put this back, run the test, and let it pass just to make sure we're back to our baseline. Awesome. Now let's go ahead and see what happens if we delete some of our JavaScript. I'll go ahead back to the app.js, and I'll just go ahead and delete the whole infinite scroll hook. And I'll rerun the test. It continues to pass. And as you can see, this is the one limitation with Phoenix LiveViewTest testing JavaScript hooks. It doesn't test any of the JavaScript. So this is the big downside. Our Phoenix LiveView tests are not really interacting with the JavaScript at all. All they're doing is sending that hook event. I'll put this back and let's go to the test to take a look at it. That's why we have this render hook load more event passing here. If you remember in other tests, for example in render clicks, we didn't want to pass the event here because we knew we were sending the event directly to LiveView. And the same thing is happening here. But the problem is that our element, the load more element, doesn't know anything about what events the JavaScript hook is going to send. It only knows that there is a JavaScript hook when we call render hook. So that's a limitation of testing hooks through Phoenix LiveViewTest. Now there are other things you can do to test JavaScript functionality. For example, you could use libraries like Wallaby or Hound to do a full end-to-end testing, JavaScript included. And I typically do that, but I think it depends on the feature and your level of comfort. Ultimately, what you're trying to do is reach a level of comfort and confidence in your test suite. If it's a particularly important path that you're trying to test and the JavaScript is involved, I would recommend you go and take a look at Wallaby or Hound and test the end-to-end flow. But if there's something that is not as important and you're confident enough with your LiveView tests, then it's possible you can test only from the side that Elixir handles and leave the JavaScript untested. All right, that's it for this lesson. I'll see you in the next one.